Most people haven't heard of light pollution yet. Many that have think it's just about the stars, seeing the stars, and that's the way it started for certain, was concerns about seeing the stars. This talk, we will start with the stars so we don't disappoint anybody, and we will end with the stars, but in between, you won't hear me say anything about stars. And that's because this problem has become, this issue has become much larger than seeing the sky. But as I say, I'll start with the sky and with the stars. This is a picture taken by a friend of mine, and when I give this talk to the public, this is sort of a fun introduction, but everybody here knows what this is, the summer Milky Way, and I don't need to belabor the anatomy of what we're seeing here. But until not very long ago, sky like this was an intimate part of our ancestors' world. It was a real part of their lives. All they had to do was step outside, and there it would be. Summer Milky Way in the summer, and winter Milky Way in the winter. And not too much earlier than that, it was an integral part of our ancestors' lives, going back to the beginning of time. Their clock, their calendar, their compass, and their Netflix. Netflix because they hung the stories of their heroes and villains, illustrated by the patterns they saw in the sky. We've traded that in modernity for this. And of course, as you all know, all that light going up in the sky is wasted energy and what we call light pollution. When in the beginning we got the electric light, it was all good, and that's in our genes. It's in our genes to fear the dark. Light, the fire has been an integral part of protecting humanity from predators and the weather, the elements from the beginning of humanity probably. So it's in our genes. And what could be the harm? Well, it turns out there's a whole lot of harm in it. Not only is it wasted money and energy, it contributes to air pollution and greenhouse gases, carbon and others, alters the diurnal cycle, impacting animal, plant, human health, contributes to crime and accidents, because poor lighting is sometimes worse than no lighting at all, and a lot of the lighting we see out here, right out here on this campus, is poor lighting, as we'll discuss some. It creates nuisance and light trespass. There's nothing good about light pollution. And what a lot of people don't know when they leave their porch light on all night is that light doesn't stop. Light, as we know in this room, has no boundaries. And this is a picture taken from the International Space Station, and you can see there's no dark place in there until you get well up into Canada, because light knows no boundary. And this process has come upon us actually in relative terms fairly rapidly. And if we don't do something about it, it's just going to continue to deteriorate. This is centered on our observatory, Central Arkansas Astronomical Society's observatory just outside Little Rock. Memphis is over there on the right. It's a light pollution map, a constructed computer map. And you can see that the only relatively dark places in here are the Ouachita, the Ozark, and I forget what the national forest is up there in eastern Missouri. But you don't, even in those places, you don't have a totally naturally dark sky. You've got to go further west. So let's drill down just a little bit on some of these concerns. And this was one, when I first heard about it, I scoffed until I began to read up on it. This is a burgeoning area of medical science, not only in connection with light pollution, but in how we treat patients in hospitals and so forth, by altering light. It's also becoming an important element in education, how we educate students by changing the light in their environment. But the bottom line is every living thing on this planet, on the surface of the planet at least, maybe not at the bottom of the ocean, has evolved in the context of a light and day cycle, night and day, the circadian process, or diurnal cycle. And that light cues critical hormonal aspects of every living thing, as I say, on the surface of the planet, including humans. When the light comes up, when the sun comes up in the morning, a certain hormonal process begins, and when it goes down at night and the light goes away, another hormonal process begins. The one at night deals with melatonin. You can go to the drugstore, by the way, and buy melatonin if you're having problems sleeping. Maybe some of you have done that here. Seems to be an increasingly popular commodity because melatonin is central to the sleep process. And a good night's sleep is critical to all kinds of health elements. The American Medical Association in 2009 published a public health statement telling us all this and explaining it and indicating that the health risks were diabetes, depression, obesity, and certain cancers, breast and prostate cancer in particular. All of these are epidemic in modern society. In addition, from a health and safety standpoint, the AMA told us that glare is a safety hazard. Improperly shielded fixtures can blind, and particularly for elderly observers, it's a bigger problem, and that presents safety and health risk. And they said we need to shield our fixtures and we need to have efficient fixtures because of the other impacts on the environment. Last year they came out with another statement, and this one was related particularly, and it's been a little bit controversial in some aspects of the lighting industry and lighting community. Maybe their wording was a little, could have been a little better, but their concern is these LED fixtures, which have a lot of virtues about them, and they're efficient, they target light, they're almost inherently shielded, but they tended to, particularly the early versions, tended to have a high blue content, in fact a blue spike, and you can see the spectrogram over on the right depicting an example of an LED fixture with this large blue spike. And this was a concern because since 2009, the studies have continued into this health issue, and it's become apparent that it is blue light in particular that impacts that hormonal process. And so they're concerned that with the retrofitting of these blue lights, we're going to compound the health impact of outdoor lighting, of light exposure to light at night. It also, blue light scatters in the atmosphere and has a sky glow concern to it. That's the reason the sky is blue in the day. So now I've got on here about UAMS. We got the University of Arkansas Medical Sciences ran a week's worth of Here's to Your Health programs on public radio on this issue. Something that we might think about here, Rebecca, if you have something like that in this part of the country. And Apple computer products all have those, to my knowledge, all these products, the phones, laptops, tablets, have a feature on them so that you can set it so when the sun goes down, the blue light starts to go out of your screen, comes back in the next day, and you can download these for other computers, for most other devices. And this is not just limited to humans. It impacts, as I say, essentially everything, and this is a burgeoning area of research in the biological field. How this is impacting frogs and their maturation and mating, and lightning bugs and their mating, migration, and predatory prey relationships, and so forth and so on. One example that I think is sort of interesting, you don't hear much about, is plankton. There are two kinds of plankton, phytoplankton and zooplankton. And ordinarily, the zooplankton rises in the water column at night, feeds on the phytoplankton. Well, if you have light pollution, it doesn't rise in the water column. It doesn't feed on the phytoplankton, and that tends to promote water pollution with algae blooms and so forth. So As indicated, the other problem is from a safety and health standpoint is improper lighting from the standpoint of being able to view, but being able to see, and this illustrates that. There's a reason all your lamps in your house have shades on them. If the eye has an enormous range of light in which it can work, but under a given circumstance, it's fairly narrow, about 4 to 1. So if we get all these lights out of here, we can see pretty well after a while. Our eyes adapt. We can see in really dim, or we can see in really bright sunlight. But the range at a given point is fairly narrow. And if you expose the eye to a fairly bright light, then it cannot see into a slightly dimmer area. And this illustrates that. Of course, this is a camera, not an eye, but it's a similar process. By shielding that light, you can then see what you could not see with it unshielded. Unshielded lighting is not effective lighting. This is a case. We got a call. Our chapter got a call from a guy. He says they've installed these lights at this apartment complex behind my house. What can we do about it? Well, I'm sort of a semi-retired lawyer, so I said we'll sue them. And so we've got that case pending, and I think I'm going to have a lot of fun with it. Because I'm going to prove, I think we're going to find that the utility company doesn't know anything about lighting. They're selling electricity, but they hold themselves out as providing security lighting. They don't know the first thing about it, and we're going to prove that. But at any rate, they install this fixture here at this apartment complex. It's 435 lux right there under the light. What they need is about 30. And then they aim it off in the distance. Now, what's behind that tree back there? This sort of proves my point about the dynamic range of the eye. And conversely, if we go down there where that tree is and turn around and look back, what can you see in the parking lot? And then the shadows on over there to the left under the stairwell. It's not good even illumination, and it's not a good security and safety situation. My client there is reading a book outside the back of his house 300 feet away with that light. I spent more time on that than I should. But so what can be done? What are the basic responsible principles of responsible lighting? Well, you only want to light where needed. That means using appropriately aimed and shielded fixtures. Only light when needed. Use curfews, motion sensors, timers, switches. Use minimum amount required. Again, because the more light you put in some place, the blinder you're going to be wherever that light cuts off. Using warmest suitable color to avoid the blue. And using efficient technology to save the energy and the carbon emissions and so forth. So this is the beauty of, this is where LED comes into its own, these LED fixtures. This picture here is an old barnyard light that I see your city has, my city has. About 12 to 16% of that light goes up into the sky, is completely wasted and contributes to sky glow. A good deal more of it goes out laterally where it runs into people's bedrooms and trespasses. It's not doing anything functional. What you want is a light that actually lights what you want, and that's what needs to be illuminated, and to do it as evenly possible. And this illustrates the potential for LED as compared to traditional lighting design to light a targeted area in an even fashion. And you can model this, so you can design it, which obviously Entergy did not do in that apartment complex, and determine what the spill light, so-called spill light, will be. And another aspect of lighting that people need to be careful about when using LED fixtures, and your municipalities around here and so forth are undoubtedly going to be doing this. So they need to be careful and not overlight when switching from a traditional fixture, high pressure sodium typically, to LED, because light fixtures, their luminosity is measured in what's called a photopic setting. The photopic setting is more or less what we have in this room, where the light level is a normal light level, that your cones in your eyes are driving the visual picture you've got. Scotopic is what happens when you're wandering around at night by starlight. Okay, those are the rods in your eyes. And you can see from this chart, they are more sensitive than the cones, and they're also more sensitive to a bluer color, to a left shifted color here, than are the cones. So in a street light type of situation, an illuminated situation at night, you're usually dealing with what they call a mesopic lighting condition. This is where both rods and cones are at work. But it more closely resembles scotopic than photopic. And so the bottom line is, you take a high pressure red, warm, high pressure sodium light, and if you match that in luminosity with a white light LED, you're going to grossly over illuminate. And so here's an example of that, where you've cut the LED in more than in half, and the lighting is actually superior to the high pressure sodium. The energy department, in an effort to the solid state lighting division of the U.S. Energy Department, recently published some work trying to address this concern about sky glow and LED fixtures. And these are some charts. I don't want to wade into these too much, but basically what we've got here, so you get the idea, is they're saying, okay, whoops, what did I do? Where's my button? Okay, this red line is a traditional, and this is nothing but street lights. They're not considering anything but street lights, okay? So it's a city without any lighting except street lights. This is the baseline for existing lighting, high pressure sodium type Cobra head fixtures. And then these are various LEDs of different colors. This is 1800 CCT, that's 4000 CCT, or that one's 4000 CCT, and I think that one's 2700, I think, if I remember correctly, but that's basically what you're looking at. And so they're charting this out. We don't have time to belabor it too much, but the bottom line is they say, look, if you cut the luminosity in half, which you should, and you eliminate uplight, you can make these new lights, which are targeted, better or not materially worse, depending on where you are, than the old high pressure sodium. And that's the essence here. Now this first line of boxes here, these first line of boxes here are unweighted. These are weighted scotopically, what I was talking about earlier. They're saying the light's not the same, and so their relative luminosity. And you see the really blue fixtures do rise above the old high pressure system, but the slightly warmer ones can stay underneath that, what we've seen before. But here's where, and so in a near observer, in other words, somebody actually in the city, I've blown that one up for you so you can see that. But here's what's really neat to me. This is some 125 kilometers outside the city. And eliminating that uplight, and what they've done is this is 50% of the luminosity and no uplight versus 2% uplight for the high pressure sodium. They're assuming the high pressure sodium were 2% uplight. And you can see the light pollution, sky glow, all but disappears at 25 kilometers. And what this comes out to tell you is, and they're assuming 15% of the light is reflecting back up in the sky from these lights. But the way they explain this is, light that reflects up just keeps going up. It's the light that's doing the damage at the distance for distant observers, is the light that's leaving the fixture almost horizontally. So that's what you get rid of when you get rid of the uplight. So all you've got, the city, you still have light pollution in the sky from the city, but not at a distance if you can get rid of the uplight. So uplight is really critical. All right, but then it's not just street lights, right? We've got commercial lighting wars, which I sort of illustrate over here. People are moths, I suppose. in a sense. Merchants think so, and they compete for attention. Architectural lighting, which is vanity lighting, look at my house, look at my church, look at my building, and security lighting. These are all areas where there's a lot of room for ordinances to address, to reduce, and manage to everyone's advantage, by the way, particularly in the commercial field, because they're just spending money. If you could stop the arms race and get everybody on a reasonable, rational playing field, it's a win-win for everybody. But I want to focus a little bit on security lighting, and I always have a little residency about talking about this, but I do every time. And I'm so far I have. It seems like people understand it, which I was always worried that I'm getting it too deep when I get into it with a lay group. But we have this assumption, widely adopted assumption, that light is an antiseptic for crime. And if you just light something up, the criminals will go away. Well, if that was true, the cities would be crimeless and the countryside would be rife with it. And of course, it's the other way around. I call this the cockroach theory of security lighting. And I'm surprised how few people understand it. I guess I was born in humbler means. I've seen a cockroach or two, you know. And when you turn the light off, what do they do? All right? Well, but criminals aren't cockroaches. They're people. And why do we light in the first place? To see what we're doing. So if we light someplace, are we inhibiting or helping the criminal? Well, the answer is, depends on whether there are eyes around, good eyes, we want to get into the gun debate, good eyes and bad eyes. Are there good eyes around to see what's being illuminated? The utility companies sell these lights, they call them night watchers. Well, they don't have eyes. Night watchers cannot see. So if you illuminate when you're not home, or you illuminate when you're asleep and everybody else is too, what are you doing? I mean, it's the reality is that there's no credible evidence that simply lighting something prevents crime, and the Illumination Engineering Society so says. And in fact, most burglary type crimes happen at night, in the daytime, not at night anyway. But you see, the utility company's got, I call him Dastardly Dan. I don't know what they call him, but there's Dastardly Dan. And he's coming to get your stuff if you don't put this light outside, and if you do, you won't. But then I always wonder why Dastardly Dan's got a flashlight if I'm gonna illuminate it for him. And wouldn't he be a lot more conspicuous if he actually needed that flashlight? So, at any rate, the National Institutes of Justice study, 1997, report to Congress is, we have very little confidence that improved lighting prevents crime, particularly since we do not know if offenders use it to their advantage, which is just what I just said. One of the few actual control studies on this is the so-called Chicago alley studies, or at least that's what I call it. There was a move to light the alleys to deal with crime, and so they said, okay, let's do that, but let's do a control study out of this. Let's light some alleys and not other alleys and see what happens. And sure enough, they lit the alleys and the crime went up. Of every category they studied, in the alleys they illuminated relative to the ones that were not illuminated, and relative to their history before they were illuminated. And this is not an outlier. In Europe, they're turning out street lights at night to save on money and carbon emissions, and as often as not, crime drops or is statistically unchanged. Washington State School District save money, cut their campus lights off. I've never understood why a school, a regular school that has no activity, bothers to light their campus, but they turn the lights out to save money. Vandalism goes to zero. It's hard to vandalize something if you can't see what you're doing. Some of this has crossed over into this country, and cities are turning off lights, and again, they find crime drops. So don't fall for a false sense of security. Lighting can enhance security when it's on a motion sensor. This is what the Illumination Engineering Society tells you to do for residential security lighting. If you want to use lighting as a security device around your home, put it on a motion sensor. That makes a lot of sense when you think about it. First of all, you're not advertising your place. You're not helping them case it. You're not drawing attention. But if someone does come around, the light comes on, there's a sense of having been detected. And maybe if you are home, you'll even notice it. But that's what they recommend. That's not the IDA. That's the illumination engineers. Otherwise, turn your lights out when you go out or go to bed, put fixtures on motion sensors, or install actual security systems. And again, when lighting is useful is when there are people out and about. Then you want to light. You want to light parking lots that people are using. You want to light, restaurant areas and people where, like downtown down here. You want to light when there are eyes around to make use of the light. And of course, the real burglar here, that's my point here, is Ready Kilowatt. But at any rate, who's picking your pocket each month. So at any rate, don't false sense of security and so forth. Now just, I made this originally as a pitch for Little Rock. And as Rick pointed out, I'm now on the energy subcommittee, so I've gotten on the inside and instead of the outside, and we're working on I've got that committee on my side, and we're trying to make some progress. We'll see if we can get anywhere with it. But I made this for our pitch to the city of Little Rock, and I just left this in here. Our little city burns $2.4 million a year for street lighting. 1.5 million kilowatts, 2 million pounds of carbon a month. And that light there, I don't know what the equivalent here in Memphis would be, but this is Edge Hill. In Little Rock, this is the old money, blue blood. This is the neighborhood, Edge Hill. And what do they got? They got a barnyard light for street lighting. And what do you see strange about it? It's been painted black. Every other fixture on that street has been painted black to preclude trespass on the houses. So all they're doing is lighting a little spot on the street. This street is not illuminated. They've just got a little spot every 150 feet. It's just mindlessness. There's a pole there, we stick a light on it and pay the utility company. And this light is 2 blocks from my home, and it has also been painted black. So this is not an uncommon problem. If you start going around your city and you see these barnyard lights in residential areas, look closely. A lot of times they've got little metal shields. They've cut sheet metal, and put up there to make a make-do fixture shield. But this is an interesting story because I know the people that live on to the left of this, on the black side of this. The people on that side had the city put it in. They wanted the city to put it in, so the city comes and put it in. These people complain it's shining in their bedroom, so they come and paint it black. These people then complain, well, it's not lighting which is what they wanted, lighting our yard anymore. So they came out and cut the back of it out. You see the back of it cut out there? So here we have what we got is a private security light paid for by the taxpayers. And this is right next to Edge Hill. And if you study this for a minute, you'll notice a wonderful thing. There are no lights. You can actually live without them. My pitch on this really comes to this point. And that is light pollution and all that it implies is a visual indicator of a larger global environmental problem. It's one more way, and a way we can see, as in this picture, that humanity is driving nature off the planet. And it ties in with the other things that we're doing to our nest. And this is carbon. Everybody's got an opinion about global warming, but you can't ignore the fact that we are changing the atmosphere. This is a 600,000, 800,000 year history of carbon in the atmosphere, and you can see we definitely are altering it. Uh, and the world population has been exploding in the last few centuries, and everybody wants a washer and dryer. And extinctions are exploding, and I think all of this ties into a single basket, and that is, with as many people as there are on this planet, we have to develop a sensitivity and a culture of sensitivity to what little bitty things add up to that we're doing individually as humans, and light pollution is one of them. So what can you do? Well, let me back that up real quick. Okay, so the path forward is education, and that equals changes in attitude, and that results in private action and public action in the form of ordinances and lighting policies, and that should result in a more beautiful, safer, efficient, sustainable cityscapes, and the ability to go outside a city and actually see the natural sky. So what can you do? Obviously, light responsibly yourself. Join IDA. Don't just leave it to your club. They need the money, and they're doing some wonderful work. Become involved with the IDA Memphis. Complain and demand better lighting in your community, and monitor the sky. Globe at night. You can look that up on the internet on how to do that, and that can be fun. And so I said I would come back to the stars, because I don't think it is inconsequential. For all as important as all these other things are, it is not inconsequential that children in this country grow up oblivious to the universe that they live in over their heads. So, questions? Yes, sir.
Could you tell us, so we could follow maybe what the style of your lawsuit is and what court it's in?
Well, our website is darkskyarkansas.com. darkskyarkansas.com. And we have a feature on there called Hall of Shame. And you can go to that Hall of Shame and see pictures of this situation. And I have no doubt that as our lawsuit goes along, we will be reporting it somewhere. The other thing is you could join our Facebook group. In fact, I think I joined y'all's the other day. It doesn't hurt to go around and join everybody's Facebook group because it shows public support. That's leverage for your chapter to get to talk to people with credibility, is to have a presence and to have support in the community. So join your own chapter's Facebook group. I saw the other day there are 12 people that belong to it. We've got ours up to 655 right now, I think. So join those groups, but it'll definitely be there. I'll be, when something happens, I'll report it on there. As for style, I don't have it with me, and there wouldn't be anything. You couldn't use that right. It's at trial stage level, and I doubt it'll ever be appealed anyway. So I'm not sure a style would get you anywhere. But those places you'll be able to follow it. And I'm interested in this because the law on light trespass is pretty thin, and historically was adverse. Courts had the same attitude. The light's good, and there's a handful of cases out there that work in our direction. But I think I'm going to be able to show this is a pretty egregious. I tell you what my real plan is. My real plan is I want the deposition of the people who designed these fixtures, and we're going to get that. And I'm going to show that they don't have any. They have no lighting expertise, no certifications. They didn't model this. They don't know anything about the IES publications on security lighting, which I got, and I'm going to cross-examine them with it, and show how ignorant they are. And then I want to take it to the Public Service Commission and ask the Public Service Commission to stop them from advertising these security lights. if they do not possess the expertise to actually provide security lighting. I think it's a false advertising, and they're selling a false sense of security, and really just pumping electricity. But anyway, we'll see how that goes. But you'll hear about it if it's successful. If it's not, you won't. Any other questions? All right. Thank you. Appreciate it.